Oh, welcome in. Why don't you come and sit down? I have something to tell you. What up, motherfuckers? Constructs, man. When I notice what people have instilled in their minds and they like thrust it upon the constructs of society, right? Lately, the one that's really been like big for me would be how we use the terms of the gods, any sort of god at any sort of time, to dictate ourselves and our society and the way that we view said society and God. It's interesting, man. If you like look around and you notice the reverence, the care, the lore even sometimes, and the amount of effort that we put into the gods really says a lot about the way we set ourselves in this society and the way we view ourselves in whatever time we happen to be in. I think that's fucking very interesting when I really look at that. And like I remember I just like heard this so like small and random. I don't even know where I heard it. But the old gods coming back kind of mentality during like World War I and shit like that. And I don't even know, I can't prove like, oh yeah, he's right because of that. Like, I don't know. I just heard that and I just thought like, that is absolutely insane. Because I always believed in this idea that, I mean, I think there are gods. I really do. I talked about in my previous videos, it might be a little bit different. They might not be truly gods, just a higher dimensional thing, right? It's a higher echelon, and you look at it and it looks holy shit to you, so you just think like, well, that's a god. I have no words for it. That is purely godlike. It could be just that simple, but I do believe in these higher beings that have these games, and we ourselves are kind of found on the inside. So do you remember my example that I made about how it might look? Like the artificial intelligence of your computer, how it inhabits inside of however computers and shit work. And all of a sudden you bring it into our world and it would think, holy shit, this is a whole new world. Look at these weird beings here, look how they think. They're all separate, they're not connected like we are in the same way. They would think that we're like just a different type of people. Well, that probably would be like if you took us and threw us into the next level. We'd think, holy shit, whole new world. This is the other world, man. And these are gods and shit. I believe it works one and the same. It's you have your understanding for wherever you're at, and that's all you have. And there are some people that might be more inclined to see how things work once on the other side, but generally everyone's jarred by the next realm. And so it's really hard for us to understand how that works. And it's interesting to think about in many different ways of, I think these beings, I think they do truly need us in one way or another. And I think there was some sort of conflict that happened with them in this next place. I can't prove any of this to you. It's just been over the years of my own work that I've been kind of gathering this shit and noticing stuff, and honestly a lot of it's really kind of built around my own book that I'm working on. So, you know, you take that with a grain of salt. The idea of how the world generally works seems to be just this fractal thing. Like where we're at in our level, and then you go down, 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 or up, up, up. It just seems to be the same thing, but in a new place. You know, you walk into a new room, you put on a new set of clothes. It's like, that seems to be generally how it is, but I don't know how that can affect us people, generally, when we move from place to place. So we come up with these, like, rigid kind of constructs to help us navigate through this world. And you see it everywhere. But I think, again, I find it the most fascinating to say, the constructs that we create for the gods above us, or the ones above us in some way, shape, or form. I find that to be so fascinating. What kind of stories we give them, and how we give them the stories, and how we revere them. And what their powers are, and how they aid us. And you could really understand where, and then the evolution of gods is interesting. You could understand if, we're to be believed when we look back and try to think how our ancestors were. You would think gods were in charge of providing the sun every day and the crops every season and sickness and in health. You would think that that's some sort of divine being. And it teeters on that superstitious thing. Like, of course there's a god fucking with the sun. Like, why wouldn't there be? It's always up, Or when the moon goes into retrograde, or when all the fucking, whatever the fuck that's called, or when the planets align, all that weird shit. You would think, yeah, of course, gods. There's no other explanation for that. But when we started moving our society past the Middle Ages, where it was like this rigidity of like Christianity and shit like that, and you move into this Renaissance and all that, when did the gods become relevant again? And it's very interesting the way that we have treated them. So Christianity seems to always hold on to the line of like, there's the one God, he's the greatest God, and you worship him, and he does everything right, and he brought his son down here, and as long as you believe all that shit happened, do the best you can go to heaven. There's that shit. But like outside of that, because for me, man, I really think there's something interesting about Christianity just as a whole that I haven't kind of uncovered yet, but I really don't know about a lot of that shit. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I don't know. Something about that stuff to me is fishy. So I haven't really walked into that room yet. But I think about ourselves with this, like, especially really like now, our understanding of the old gods and how like there's a resurgence of pagan kind of worship and shit again. Is that pure ignorance? Are we just doing that because, I don't know, make up a reason? Or are we trying to reconnect with our real selves again? Because you gotta understand, most of us, where we come from, like our heritage and shit, doesn't matter where it was, whether it was in Ireland, England, Russia, like what is modern day, let's say, Baltic peoples, Italian, I don't know where else, France, even places in Asia. Christianity was kind of forced on everybody, and it became this is what you fucking believe. And so we had to, one way or another, drop our old shit. And in that dropping, man, I just think we've lost so much of who we are. And I mean, we look at our modern world, we're so clueless. There is no true good culture. It's just a bunch of bullshit. A lot of it feels phony because we don't really even know what the fuck we're doing, Like if you were to wherever you come from, or you were to say I want to look at the gods that my ancestors used to worship. Good luck really understanding what the fuck that means, because you lost so much. You don't have any way to make sense of it. It's fucked up, man. I don't know. I don't trust that shit like that. Christianity and all that. Christianity's been around for 1,000 years or more. I know, it's still too weird for me. But the constructs that we have our own gods really play out with the culture that we have. So there's one idea of how we can tie this conversation in. Is what we're essentially doing, would be, they are kind of this catalyst to our progressive change that we're moving through in our lives. They're this element of control in a sense. So you place it up on this kind of tier, and then that is the element in which dictates our lives and stuff. You pray to them for anything. You worship them. You provide them things, and it doesn't matter how you believe in the element works, but in some sense you are giving them some sort of power. In that giving of power, I always think well, fuck. If you're indeed doing that, are you actually doing that for higher beings? Is this some sort of construct in your mind that you're just making this shit up? This isn't doing anything. And in fact, it's like a placebo effect. You're actually, is it something like that? Or are we truly giving power to another? For good or for bad? Let's say that the other realms that exist are just bad. Let's pretend, okay? Well, if you're giving power to them, some sort of demon-like creatures, to inhabit yourself and to dictate your life in a way of sin, and bad things. I mean, because even in that old thought experiment, like, well, who's to say? That's a very Christian sounding idea. But even if you were doing that, you're allowing these darker things to influence your lives and stuff. So you would see some sort of reflection of that. But then you have to start thinking like, well, why are they darker? Dark to our construct? Evil to us? How is that the same as evil to them? What, they just like look here and just kind of like, oh man, I hope one of them talks to me so I can fuck his shit up. You know, like, do they really think that way? I don't know if that makes any fucking sense, does it? But what if it's the other thing? What if it's purely good? Like, well, who looks down at something and says like, oh man, I hope when they talk to me, I hope I can really help them. I hope they're, you know, they really need me, that I can do the best I can do for them. Or are they just living their own lives separate from us? And in our communication, like, are we just being harvested? Like, in a sense of like, so in my book, when the Titans came to the realm of life and they shaped it, there's a lot of beliefs that they were farming the worship from these beings to give them power to use it in this other realm. It's like this farming process. You made this place, you suck all the life out of these animals, like all the milk. You know, you look at these giant like corporate fucking farms and shit. It's just like that, and that's what life is. Well, you can reflect that to our real life, but is that something that indeed that the ones above us are doing too? I don't know. I mean, I'm throwing a lot of this stuff out there. Can we believe in anything? In what we try to do? I don't know. I don't know. It's just, again, these are all these constructs that we have. It's like we have these rigid lines of what things are. Like, you are a god, and I worship you. And you're the god of the harvest, and you look kind of like this, and this is generally what you get mad about. Like, it's just interesting that we can do that. We can just create these rigid things. And it doesn't seem like it's even possible, because everything is so, what's the word I'm looking for? We're all so vastly different and complex, just as human beings. Those complexities will only double when you go to somewhere you've never been before, because you have no context to it. So the complexities grow. And then it turns into like when you meet someone you've never heard of for the first time, or you walk into a settlement of people that you've never met before, like when the Spaniards came to America, or when you just meet a new person. You don't know shit about them, so anything about them is a little bit different. It's very complex, and you got to really watch it, especially if it's cultural. You're like, oh, I don't know, like, is this offensive to them? What does that mean? Did he flip me off? Like, what the fuck is this shit? Like, you have this whole thing that you yourself don't have any constructs for. And so you have nowhere to throw that shit. Like, well, I don't know, like, I'll go back and think of this, so that'll help me deal with these people. If it's like that with human beings, who the fuck says it isn't like that with them? And I remember reading in the Catechism why they treat God with this kind of like perfection. And like how like he's just this perfect being that we can never understand. It's for this very same reason of the reason that they do that, they say, is because if they start putting hard lines on him, they start like defining him, that takes away from his godliness. Because we can't truly grasp what he is, we should never put human qualities on him to be defined. Because we can't define it. Because if we try doing that, it might be wrong. So let's just say he's perfect and infallible, and then we'll just, that way we don't accidentally make him too human. And I think in that sentence, just that alone, really says quite a bit about how we treat religion. And these are people that are influencing religion. The more human you make your God, the more you bring him down to our level and make him less of a God. Was that one of the kind of effects that they tried doing to get rid of the old gods? Make them more human. When I read like Irish legends or even Welsh and stuff like that, sometimes I'm confused on if they're gods or not. I'm reading it, I'm like, these just feel like people. You know, like when I was doing the ulcer cycle, I'm like, this just feels like people. These don't feel like gods to me. They seem like they could be. Like, I'm not saying they're not. I definitely could tell there's some sort of godmanship in there, however the fuck you say that. But they just feel like people. And I'm like, okay, this story is finally written down. If this was some sort of oral tradition, it's just one of them making them humans and birthing them into this world. This is what I want to say about that. That just triggered something in me. In saying that, I really can see how we have believed in this sort of fae people as like a general term. You know, these spirits that might have been gods at one point and become these like lesser things, but still kind of not really of this world, still kind of weird, magical, and maybe exist in the other worlds. I can see maybe that's where there's this connection that they might have had. So they were once these godly beings, and it seems like this is a bad thing to have them birthed into our world to become, I wouldn't call them like demigods or anything, but they're no longer this high, immortal, godlike being. They become this weird, strange spirit, or this strange fae person, folk, or whatever you want to call it, or the strange elf-like, whatever we consider these like fantasy creatures. What if that's what we're talking about right here, where it's like they were born in this other place, they were this god, and in this process of in this process of humanizing them, they lose this power and they come to this place, and now they're here with us, in a sense, because they're still not human. And now that they're kind of existing between both areas, and this is a process that was happening because of the war of the gods above us. Like, we're actually dealing with that. These beings that were once gods use human beings to ungod them. So I remember hearing about, like, with the Irish monks that might have wrote down the Tawn, that story about the taking of the bowl of Culain, or whatever, however you say that. These people might have been downgraded in a sense from godly beings to just people, because that's the process of it. They're up here, let's bring them down. And it's a human thing. Anyway, that was just something that kind of hit me as I was listening back to this, and I wanted to throw that in there. It's just one of them making them humans and birthing them into this world. I like to use that thought experiment when it comes to, like in my book, right? The Forgotten King. Trapped in this other realm, trapped in the realm of creation, being driven mad by it because it's a power greater than he could ever understand. So he's going crazy. If birthing him into our world would mean a conduit and a human explanation of self, well, that must mean that he himself is fractured amongst the many different realms. And within the realm of our life, he must be fractured. Maybe he's fractured in a way that is spread amongst us, and those are his human qualities. And if we could form them together, we can have some sort of part of him on this world here, and we can birth a god. Like, what if that's what any prophet is? A small fraction of a god. Because that's why they hear them, that's why they do their bidding, and that's why they are kind of like, prophets always talk about hearing God, or just, you know, at least that's how it's described in the Bible and shit. Like, he's physically talking to them, telling them to do things. What if that just means you have a part of him inside of you, that God, right? You think of like, what the fuck's his name? Muhammad, and the God of the Israel, or the whatever the fuck those people are called. God damn it, what are they called again? Muslim with an I. I just said it earlier. Whatever. I don't know if that's the same God as the Jewish one or the Christian. I think they're all different. But who's to say that's not some sort of part of him wanting to be birthed here? Who's to say that they're not using this religion as a process to come inside of our world in one way, shape, or another? You think of Jesus Christ and all that, and that's like, why was he confused? Because it's like, well, he is the fucking Son of God, but he is God. And I'm just like, okay, he's son of man, he is. What if he's like, what if that was a process of someone finally coming through? Right set up circumstances, right time. Everything just happened perfectly. And he came through. And that God was able to influence this world here. And it's like one of the major fucking religions in our world, Christianity. But that's just one of like hundreds of different gods. We don't fucking know, you know? You can't say that you go in the past and there wasn't a Jesus Christ moment for one of the fucking Irish gods. Or one of the like, the Slovakian, Balkan kind of people. Like their set of gods, or even the Finnish, or what. You can't tell me that there wasn't groups of people that didn't believe, like, this man here is coming through. He is like hearing the voice of God. He is part of God. You can't tell me that's never fucking happened before. It's just they vanish because the real sense of who they are, we can't ever grasp again. So if we can't pick that up to worship it, to bring it life again. Because I think that's the way you bring power to gods, is just through worship. Because that means you're keeping them in your minds, and that means you're allowing your mind to be this vessel for them to manifest through. That's all that shit seems to be. Like worshiping of a god, praying to him, obeying the tenets, or doing whatever it fucking takes to be in the sphere that he can use. You're using yourself as an open vessel, ready to go. So he can, like, okay, boom, I'm in here now, and I can do what I need to do with this person, and jump around and just say certain things, or whatever it happens to be. I think that is all they're really needing. But you have to have the true sense of it. And then why does it make sense that we have Christianity and Jews, and which the Jews never really go around recruiting? That's the funny thing. That's what's fishy about that. Or like Islam. That's the word I was thinking of. I don't know. I think they do. They recruit, I guess. I don't fucking know. I feel like you just believe or you don't. But it seems to be they go around and trying to open up vessels for understanding, and that's why these ones are the main ones. Not the only ones in the world, trust me, but they're the huge ones. What are they after? You know, what are these beings after that lie above us? I don't fucking have a clue. But just very interesting things to kind of think about, like our constructs of this and how we view it. Like, I'm kind of saying all this stuff so I can invoke something in whoever is watching, like just to get you to think about it in your own way. You know, be slightly vague. I just think there's something to this, and we're not being 100% honest with what it really is. I think that we don't give it enough credit, and sometimes I think we give it too much credit. I think there are times where we really think that this is it, and this is what matters. The Christian God, that's fucking it. That's the only one, and this is the only thing that matters. I think that's giving too much credit, and I think not giving enough credit is like people that don't believe in God. People that are very science-oriented, people that, you know, worship the shrine of mankind. I think that's not taking it seriously enough. I think we have this problem, and there's these middle people that are kind of left out in all this and very confused by it. Like, you know, I don't truly believe in this, but I don't really believe in that either, and I feel like I'm in the middle. So it's like, I think people like that need to be the explorers of thought, man. Like, if you don't know where you are, and you don't know how to be, and you don't understand what's going on around you, well, then you have to explore. And that's not just a physical thing. That's what's interesting about it. You don't have to explore. You can just sit, like in my fucking little office here. You can just sit right in here and explore this shit. And see what the world is around you. And how it works, and how you fix yourself within it. Because there's so many different ways that you can activate parts of yourself that can purposefully or accidentally allow shit in. You know, whether that's a belief system or whether that's some sort of divine intervention. Like, you can allow shit in. You just got to be very careful of how you allow it in. And in what way it affects you. If any of that makes sense. It's difficult, man. I totally get it. This is not something that is really even easy to talk about. I feel like I've rambled through this entire video, honestly. I don't even know if people will watch this because it's rambly. But that's kind of how it feels at times, man. Like when you're trying to really walk into this new place and you're really trying to navigate your way in and see how this all works, it can feel very difficult and jarring. And just like every time you try to put up a buoy, or every time you try to put up like, okay, like this is the fucking this is what I'll come back to, because this is the understanding that I have in this part of this realm, and you walk away, that might not fucking stay there. Or it might just vanish. It's like in exploring a new concept, it's almost like exploring a new place. It's almost like exploring another realm. And along the way, you have to come up with these like markers to say like, I've been here, so I don't get lost. Those markers are concepts of like, whenever you reach that point of the concept, you place the marker and say like, I think that's an allegory for blah, blah, blah. Or I think this is how they believe the gods work, and whatever the fuck it is. You think you know, and then you're like, okay, let's go on to the next area of this concept, and then we can explore it more. That way I can look back and use all these together to write my book on what is Christianity to the Christians. But that doesn't make it right. You could do all that shit and then still be super confused, because you've not allowed yourself to be infused into this society, into this concept or construct. That can be very difficult. And like for myself, I always find that I kind of, this is all that I really like to do, is like navigate my way through shit I don't understand, or try to grasp different levels of humanity and like how they think and what they do. I always try to do this. It's one of my goals in life. A lot of the times I take what little I can understand and I just throw it into the book, man. I just toss it into this shit and see what I can do with it within here, and how I can shape it and form it. And once I have the concept and I found, okay, how is it good for them? How is it bad for everyone else? And how do people react to it, in it and outside of it? Then I feel more comfortable in saying like, okay, I think this is kind of a concept of the idea. It's a moving construct of what I see in the outside world. I took it and placed it into my world, and we're going to kind of move it around till this puzzle piece fits naturally into place. That's the shit I'm doing, right? So to me, it's great to explore, because whenever you think of an explorer, you only ever think of physical. Like, yeah, he went to the mountains. This guy went over to this country and founded blah, blah, blah. And we think those are explorers, but no one ever takes serious thought exploration. And that's the one thing I love doing, is moving my ass through different ideas and consciousness shifts, or groups of people's mindsets. Watching a group of people and gauging how they're reacting to the world around them, figuring out how that happened to be, what were the factors that led them to this way of living, and how can we construct a concept of what they are, again, with the marker system inside of their own thoughts. It's very interesting, man. You got to have one toe in this world and one toe in the other. That's the only way to really do it properly, if at all. And I'm not saying I do it properly. I don't even know if I'm doing it. But yeah, just some things to kind of think about, just to navigate through, because that's essentially what this whole channel's idea is we are trying to go into another place and pull from it as much as we can comprehend. And most of the time it's not very much. I was falling asleep last night, for instance, and I was listening to a podcast. One was about a guy that talks a lot about daemons, which are like these otherworldly spirits, kind of like the Fae people and shit. And that was his whole thing, was just like his, belief system. Fairies, just things that we can't explain. He's trying to unravel through what he considers imagination. And imagination is the fucking soul of I think he said it like, imagination is like almost like the soul of the universe. It's a very ancient belief system created by the certain Greek, I forgot the name of all this stuff. We'll get into it at some point. How imagination is vital to the understanding of the soul of the universe, and that we are some fractal nature from it and shit. It's a whole ass thing. And he's talking to a guy that kind of believes in that stuff too, but he's more into William Blake, the fucking poet from like the 17 or 1800s that I don't know shit about. But he does talk a lot about the other world in some sense or some form or whatever it is, and Christian elements. I don't know. Anyway, I was falling asleep listening to their conversation, and it just dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute, the Forgotten King. I don't know if he would need that body. I don't know if he needs the body from this realm here. And like I kind of woke myself up from it because I had more thoughts about it. But then it all kind of disappeared. I was like, what are you talking about? He doesn't need the body. This is not what he needs. And then it kind of left me like jarred. I was like, what the fuck is... And then I had to pause their conversation and try to sit there and like recall like what was that like dreamscape trying to tell me. And I don't know still. I gotta still fucking... That's on my mind. Like, I don't... What do you mean he doesn't need... I need... That's the plot. What are you talking about? So sometimes shit, you pull it from this other, and you have to be in a certain state of mind. And a lot of times people assume it's drugs. You have to be on ayahuasca or DMT or shit like that. Mushrooms. Or you have to be like super meditative. I always find the best shit comes in the dreamscape. It always comes through the astral. So like, this information will come. It doesn't mean you know what it fucking means. Sometimes like that, you'll hear it and you're like, you didn't even finish your thought. What are you talking about? And then nothing. And so you have to try to discern what that means here. That your lab. You have to come to the real world and use everything you know about the real world and say like, okay, well, what did that mean with everything we can understand here? That he doesn't need a body. This God stuck in another realm doesn't need a body. What are you talking about? Like, so that's something that can happen. But you have to be ready for it. And it can come at any time. And there are a lot of times where, I don't want to say I communicate with God, but there are many times that I feel like I'm in conversation with some other things, and it's helping me discern shit here. Always in the dreamscape. Always in that kind of lucid part of like you're falling asleep process. Those are where you're most vulnerable, because that's I consider it here like the strings of astral. It's like you're passing through them, these little highways, and then when you fall asleep and dream, you are in the actual astral realm. That is a place that's rigid and shit. And it feels like they don't have as much control there. They almost have a lot more control in those astral strings. Think about all the times in your life where weird shit happens when you're trying to fall asleep, or certain moments of like clarity, or shit. Well, you'll hear it and it'll happen in that moment and there, and it'll like in a semi-dream. You kind of, like my sister once told me. Here's an example. That she was falling asleep and then there was a guy. He's like, "Your alarm will go off in 3, 2, 1," and all of a sudden, and then it really went off in real life. Like, you can't explain some things that happen in those moments. I think it's because that's right there as you're passing right into what cannot be explained, which is why that's my favorite part of sleeping, is falling asleep. I try to be as hyper aware as I possibly can there. But anyway, we'll call this one, and I don't know what we're going to call it, the moving constructs of gods. I don't know. Our moving constructs of gods, we'll call it that.